My father died on a Tuesday. Maple Grove's January air was brittle with wind, the kind that slices the skin in thin, invisible lines. We buried him beneath a bald sky, no clouds, no mercy, just winter full and unrelenting, the kind of winter that makes you understand what endings really are. I stood graveside, my breath fogging, Lauren at my right, her gloved hand looped gently around my arm like a performance she was too good at now. Dustin stood on the other side, silent in his charcoal suit, eyes darting, not in grief but calculation. He didn't cry, neither did she. Maybe that should have told me something. I did, quietly, as they lowered the coffin. A single, dry sob that I crushed into my scarf before anyone could hear it. I was the only one who cried for that man. The man who raised me, bled to build the company that bore his initials. The man who taught me that legacy wasn't inherited, it was carried. I carried it all the way through his chemo, his decline, the final months where he forgot the name of the business and sometimes even mine. Lauren never left my side during that time. She made the calls I couldn't. She organized the board's sympathy cards, managed the noise. She held my hand when I signed the DNR. She was perfect, loving, efficient. But now I know better. Now I see the difference between support and surveillance. The burial ended without speeches. My father had always said funerals were for the living, so we said little. Just a handful of dirt, a nod to God or whatever remained after the morphine stopped working. Then we left. It was that same afternoon, as the last of the mourners faded into the parking lot haze, that Lauren turned to me, her voice low, measured, like the way she spoke in board meetings, practiced enough to sound spontaneous. "We need stability," she said. "Investors are nervous. The staff's uncertain. I think, just for now, we should consider Dustin, temporary CEO, just to ease the pressure on you." I looked at her, not quite hearing her through the ache behind my eyes. "Just for now," she said again, more softly. My father had been dead for less than 6 hours. But I didn't argue. Not then. I had no fight left. Grief doesn't make you blind. It makes you tired. And tired men trust the wrong people. Lauren sat on the board. She'd earned her place there, or so I thought. Years of side consulting, public image reshaping, whispers in the right ears. She was good at appearing vital. To me, to the board, to the staff. I thought her loyalty was carved into the walls of that company. Same as mine. So I nodded. A single, hollow nod. Dustin said nothing, just shook my hand, squeezed it a little too long, like he was already learning how to enjoy the power I had just handed him. 5 days passed like smoke, the kind of days that drift by without shape. Cold coffee, condolence emails, back-to-back meetings I don't remember attending. I wore the same suit 3 days in a row, ate nothing, slept even less. Then Friday morning, a sealed envelope appeared on my desk, white, thick, stamped with a red confidential. No name on the outside, but I already knew what was inside before I opened it. You can smell betrayal like ozone before a storm. Termination, effective immediately, no cause, no warning, just 3 pages of corporate formality. My name erased, my keycard deactivated, my office reassigned. The board had convened an emergency vote, bypassed procedure, overrode my standing as interim chairman. And Lauren, my wife, my partner, the woman who had watched me bury my father with dirt still under my fingernails, had been in that room. She hadn't abstained. She hadn't objected. She hadn't even looked at me. The envelope might as well have been an obituary, not mine, hers, because whatever we were before that letter, it died in that moment. I walked out of the office slow, not from shock, from restraint. If I moved too quickly, I might burn the place down. Instead, I removed my badge, left it on the desk, walked the same hallway I'd walked since I was 23, back when my father first made me a junior associate with a tiny office that stank of fresh paint and too much ambition. I nodded at the receptionist, who gave me a weak smile and looked quickly away. She already knew. Everyone already knew. They'd been told to expect it, just not to speak of it. That night, Lauren poured wine like nothing had changed. She asked how my day went, voice soft, the same voice she used the night my father flatlined. I stared at her for a long time. I wanted to ask her how she did it, how she orchestrated all of it. The proposal, the vote, the removal. While sleeping beside me every night, our bed still warm from my grief. But I didn't ask. I just smiled. I told her I was tired, and I let her believe I hadn't figured it out yet. She didn't know that I'd already been preparing for war. The next day, I drove to the registry office. My name was still listed as the company's primary proxy holder. My father had made sure of that before he died. In the trust documents, in the chain of ownership, I still held the keys. Lauren had relied on my grief making me too soft, too distracted to check the locks. She was wrong. That morning, with hands that didn't shake and eyes that didn't blink, I revoked every single authorization I had ever granted her. Power of attorney? Gone. Shareholder proxy? Voided. Every emergency authorization she used to pass herself off as co-founder, as board leader, as the grieving widow of a legacy, deleted with 3 signatures and 1 notarized statement. Then I froze the company's credit line. Every executive card, every transfer path, every expense account locked. I changed every password I'd created, updated every access point Lauren and Dustin had grown used to treating as theirs. I did it calmly, quietly, like a surgeon. By Monday morning, the boardroom doors wouldn't open. Dustin's access badge wouldn't scan. Lauren's login credentials returned a system error. Their names were gone, and mine was still written into the stone of the foundation. The part they forgot to check while planning their quiet coup. Lauren was the first to call. She didn't shout, didn't curse. That wasn't her style. Just one sentence, cold as the wind on the day we buried my father. "What are you doing?" I waited a breath, then answered her as plainly as I could. What I should have done the day after the funeral. Then I hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. That would have given her the satisfaction of knowing she'd drawn blood. I wanted her confused. I wanted her wondering how much I knew, how deep I dug before they buried me. The answer? Deeper than they ever guessed. Because even in grief, I had watched them. I had documented every vote, every unsigned form, every whisper in the hallway I wasn't meant to hear. While they were plotting in plain sight, I was building a case in silence. You don't erase a legacy with a vote. You bury a body, not a man. And Lauren was about to learn the difference. I didn't rage. I didn't make a scene. I left the war room in silence, the same way my father had taught me to enter it, with purpose. Let them flail. Let them wonder. I would not give them the pleasure of watching me bleed. I had already bled enough for this family. Lauren assumed she had won, that her boy, her Dustin, had inherited not just the corner office, but the legacy that came with it. She mistook my quiet for defeat. That's the danger of betrayal. When you're the one holding the knife, it's easy to forget that the wound doesn't always K***L. Sometimes it sharpens the victim. So I walked out without saying goodbye, left my name badge on the secretary's desk. I didn't even look back. I let the building, my building, swallow the last image of me they'd ever see as an employee. But I wasn't leaving as an employee. I was leaving as an architect. The car ride home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone. The city passed in a gray blur, rain streaking the windows like fingerprints on glass. I drove without speaking, without blinking, without anything but the cold, precise rhythm of what came next ticking behind my ribs like a clock made of razors. That night, while Lauren slept, or pretended to, I stood at my office window and looked out over the city. I saw the company tower in the distance. Its lights were still on, probably Dustin, pacing the executive floor like a king, thinking the crown had landed on his head by divine right. Maybe he was sitting in my chair. Maybe he was calling in favors. Maybe he was printing new business cards, embossing his name in silver ink like a child playing dress-up in a dead man's suit. I let him. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted them all to, because the fall hits harder when the floor is pulled out just as you take a step. The first move was legal, clean, surgical. As my father's named successor, I was still registered as the company's proxy holder with the state registrar. Lauren had never bothered to check. Too focused on the board vote, too convinced that ceremony could overwrite substance. So I went back, quietly, alone, walked into the registry building in a coat still damp from rain and submitted the forms myself. No assistants, no paralegals, just me, a black pen, and documents that stripped every last shred of authority from Lauren and her son. Every authorization I had given her over the past decade rescinded in ink. Power of attorney, nullified. Voting privileges by marriage, revoked. Emergency access to the treasury line, erased. Then I changed the structure of the proxy chain itself. Not to myself, that would have made me too visible. No, I handed it to an old friend of my father's, one of the founding partners no one had seen in years, a man loyal to blood and memory more than boardroom games. He signed without hesitation, didn't even ask why. About time, he muttered. I nodded. We didn't need to speak further. By noon the next day, the paper trail was dry. The state confirmed the update. The control was mine again, indirectly, quietly, fully. Then I turned to the company's internal systems. For a decade, I had architected the infrastructure of our digital presence. Lauren always called me old-fashioned for being so hands-on. Hire people, she said. Let the text do it. But I didn't. Not fully. I knew every database, every pipeline, every emergency K*LL switch buried beneath the interface like a landmine. She had no idea what I had built into the foundation. So I logged in. One terminal, one connection, and I shut it all down. It started with the treasury. I froze the company's master credit line. Every account linked to an executive card was suspended. Every auto payment, every scheduled fund transfer, every travel budget. Then I locked the cards. Not canceled, just frozen. Enough to confuse, enough to delay, enough to send a ripple through the calm waters of their stolen confidence. Then came access. I rewrote the door codes to the executive wing, changed the master passwords for HR, for payroll, for board documentation. I didn't delete anything, that would have been petty. I simply rerouted it all, like pouring a river into a different valley. When Dustin arrived that Monday morning, the glass doors wouldn't open. His badge blinked red. Security codes invalid. When he tried to log into his account, the system rejected his credentials. User not recognized. When he called IT, the help desk didn't answer because I had suspended the internal network's employee tier routing. Chaos began at 7:46 a.m. By 8:30, I received a call from Lauren. She didn't yell. She knew better than that. She was cold, precise, measured, like always. What are you doing? She asked. Her voice was flat. No pretense now. The warmth was gone. I answered just as flat. What I should have done the day after the funeral. A beat of silence. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I made the mistake 5 days ago when I didn't see the knife in your hand. Click. She hung up first. Then came Dustin. He didn't call, he texted. A dozen messages in 5 minutes. All panic masked as professionalism. Hey, looks like the systems are down. Is this an outage? Need to escalate this. Treasury's not responding. Any idea what's happening with access control? I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I watched the internal logs, watched the admin pings fail, watched the recovery attempts trip over my architecture, watched their illusion unravel, thread by thread. Then came the attorney. Not mine. There's Michael, he said on the voicemail. We'd like to set up a meeting, discuss some terms. There may have been some miscommunication. Let's get in front of this. Miscommunication. The word tasted like ash. They had voted me out in silence. Now they wanted a conversation. I didn't return the call. Instead, I opened the folder, the one I had been building since the week my father got his diagnosis. Emails, proxies, board minutes, internal memos, authorization requests, transaction logs. Every time Lauren leveraged her marital status to pull rank, every time Dustin approved something beyond his clearance. I had it. I had it all. Even the night Lauren first suggested Dustin shadow me during executive sessions, I had the transcript. I had her phrasing. "We need to prepare for continuity," she'd said, "in case your father goes sooner than expected." She said it 6 days before his heart stopped. No one noticed at the time how easily she said it, but I did. I remembered. The folder was thick, annotated, cross-referenced. A silent monument to betrayal. I made copies, not to send yet, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. This wasn't grief twisting my memory. They had done this. They had planned it, and I had documented every moment. They thought they'd won, that I'd fold, that grief would keep me pliant. But I was my father's son, and they had forgotten what kind of man he raised. The first day was confusion. The second was chaos. By the third, panic began to seep in beneath the doors they could no longer open. Dustin called again, this time not with questions but accusations. "You're tanking the company," he barked over the phone. "This is sabotage, and you know it. You're jeopardizing shareholder trust." His voice cracked toward the end. That wasn't stress. That was fear. The kind of fear that creeps in when you realize the throne you climbed into was never yours, and the ground beneath it is vanishing. I didn't answer him directly, just said, "Have legal send me something if you think that's true." He hung up before I finished the sentence. By noon, the boardroom had fractured into factions. Half still believed the story Lauren spun, that I had stepped down voluntarily, that my absence was mutual, coordinated, strategic. The other half had seen the signs. The sudden silence from the Treasury office, the emails bouncing, the wrong names disappearing from access logs. And the old man, my father's friend, the one I'd quietly placed back on the proxy chain, began making calls. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just asked one question again and again. Who's really in control here? The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't return to the office. Didn't need to. I had buried enough of myself in those walls already. My presence wasn't required. My reach was already there in the systems, in the policies, in the very skeleton of the infrastructure. I wasn't locked out. They were. Lauren's second call came that night. No greeting. No pretext. "You're destroying everything we built," she said. I let the silence stretch, then replied, "We didn't build it." "I did. You just redecorated." She laughed, dry and sharp. "You really think you'll come out of this clean? You think investors won't turn on you when this hits the press?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "I think they'll look at the numbers and see who kept the lights on, and who turned the company into a family reunion." Click. She hung up again. That was becoming a habit. The next day, I received the formal letter from the company attorney, 4 pages of polished corporate ambiguity. Words like reconciliation, restoration of trust, shared vision. Buried in the language was the suggestion, not a demand, not yet, that I attend a mediated meeting, that perhaps we could clarify intentions. Intentions. They never mentioned the vote, never apologized for the termination, never explained how the board had authorized a transition without informing stakeholders. It was as if they wanted to skip past the crime and jump straight to the forgiveness. Skip the autopsy, go straight to the eulogy. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the folder. It had grown. At first, it was just the obvious things: memos, emails, voting records. But the more I dug, the more I remembered what my father had taught me. The little tells. The mistakes people make when they think no one's watching. I found the internal transfer logs. Saw how Dustin had approved a 6-figure rebranding campaign under his own name before his appointment was even formalized. Caught him shifting marketing contracts to a firm owned by one of his college roommates. Found the red flags buried in invoice approvals, with Lauren's initials co-signed in digital ink. They thought they were smart. They weren't. They were fast, reckless, entitled. They moved like they owned it all because they assumed no one would challenge them. But I had challenged them, not with noise, not with threats, with receipts. Every document, every transaction, every backdated memo they'd slipped past the junior legal team, I had them. Every signature they'd faked or forged under the illusion of authority, copied and watermarked. I started building a map, not for revenge, for clarity, for the record. I wanted to see plainly how deep the rot went. Lauren and Dustin weren't anomalies. They were symptoms of a system that had grown too comfortable, too complacent. My father had built the company on sweat and precision. They wanted to run it on charm and proximity, and the cracks were already showing. The internal audit committee flagged inconsistencies in Dustin's first quarterly report. Vendors weren't being paid. Budgets didn't align. One of our oldest clients had suddenly pulled their contract, citing loss of institutional confidence. The finance VP, one of the few old guard executives still left, sent a private message to the board. "This isn't sustainable," she wrote. "And if we don't fix it soon, we're looking at regulatory risk." They thought I'd be silent. Instead, I was the only one still listening. Meanwhile, Dustin tried to save face. He posted company updates on LinkedIn, self-congratulatory blurbs about new leadership and visionary strategy, photos of himself in the office I had designed, pretending to be the man he had never earned the right to become. The comments were polite, mostly, but a few betrayed the shift already happening beneath the surface. Looking forward to hearing more from the founding team. Will the original leadership be involved in upcoming decisions? Hope this isn't another case of succession without strategy. Each like on those comments was a small betrayal, a whisper that the room was tilting again. Lauren responded by tightening the leash. She tried to spin it, sent out an internal letter from the board chair's desk, emphasizing unity during times of transition. She called my removal a strategic pivot. She called my silence gracious. I let her speak, let her write, let her paint whatever version of the story she needed to keep the house of cards from falling. Because I wasn't coming back to the table. I was flipping it. Another letter came, this one from outside counsel, harsher tone. Mentioned potential breach of fiduciary duty, warned of irreparable harm to the company's operations, threatened to pursue legal remedies if I didn't comply with immediate system restoration. They were finally showing their teeth. I still didn't answer. I didn't need to, because a day later, the first whistleblower email arrived in my inbox. Subject line, "You should see this." It was from a mid-level accounts manager, someone I barely remembered, but he had seen the signs. He knew something was off, and he sent me a copy of a report Dustin had edited, one that misrepresented budget overruns as planned reallocations. It had been approved by Lauren, rubber-stamped. Disguised. He ended the email with one sentence. "I don't know what side you're on, but I trust you more than them." I read that sentence again, slowly, not because I needed the validation, but because I realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every silent person who had watched the company turn into a dynasty project. Every staff member who had seen titles traded like favors. Every executive who had swallowed doubt because speaking up meant exile. I had taken the first step, but now the others were starting to move too. Receipts breed truth, and truth breeds fear for the people who built their empire on lies. So I opened a new folder, marked it Witnesses, and I waited. I knew what would come next. The offers, the back channels, the desperate pleas to keep this out of the press, out of the courts, out of the public's view. They'd beg for mercy without ever admitting guilt. They'd try to buy silence with equity they no longer deserved. But I wasn't looking for a deal. I was looking for clarity, and they had written it for me in every signature they thought no one would see. A week passed, just 7 days. That's all it took for the cracks to become canyons. For every quiet doubt to find its echo. For the company I had once bled for to wake up and realize it had crowned a prince who couldn't hold the sword. Lauren stopped calling. She knew by then that the calls would go unanswered. That whatever thread she thought she held around my neck had long since snapped. She must have felt it, that cold, slipping loss of control. Like watching water drain from a vessel she was sure had no cracks. I gave her silence. It was the only language left that she couldn't mimic, couldn't manipulate. The emails kept coming though. Some internal, some anonymous. Board members reaching out off the record. Legacy clients offering condolences under the guise of quarterly check-ins. A former executive assistant mine wrote a one-line message that said everything. You were always the only adult in the room. It should have felt like vindication. Didn't. I felt nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, just clarity. I watched from a distance as the machine they'd hijacked began to stutter. Vendors delayed shipments. HR flagged errors in payroll distribution. Staff turnover quietly climbed. Our largest international partner demanded renegotiation, citing recent organizational instability. Dustin hadn't been seen in the main office for 3 days. Rumor was he'd locked himself in the executive suite, refusing to face the mounting questions. Lauren had tried to manage the narrative. She wrote statements, held a quiet emergency meeting with investor relations. But words don't build bridges, actions do. And the only action anyone remembered now was mine. I had walked away, and the foundation trembled. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. It wasn't Lauren, wasn't legal, wasn't Dustin with another tantrum buried in a voicemail. It was Walter Kingsley, the last original board member still serving. 74 years old. Spoke like gravel. Eyes like a hawk behind bifocals. He had sat beside my father in every major decision for 3 decades. They built the company in hotel lobbies and midnight diners. Back when deals were inked in sweat, not slideshows. Walter didn't waste words. Let's talk, he said. Face to face. I agreed. Not out of courtesy, out of respect. Not for the board, but for the man who remembered what we used to be before we turned into whatever this had become. We met at a private club downtown. Quiet, discreet. No reporters. No staff. Just 2 men in suits that didn't quite fit anymore. Sitting at a corner table while the city hummed outside like it didn't know our world was collapsing. He ordered tea. I didn't order anything. Walter leaned forward. His voice was steady, but tired. This place was yours. Your father wanted it that way. He told me once, Michael's not the loudest in the room, but he's the only one who doesn't need to be. He paused, watching me. You should be in that chair. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He nodded. What they did, it was a disgrace. Some of us didn't know. Some of us didn't ask. Maybe that's the same thing. I waited. Let him get to it. We want you back. Simple. Plain. No flourish. Not need. Not beg. Just want. I looked out the window for a long time. Watched a delivery truck stall at the light. Watched a man rush across the crosswalk with coffee in both hands. Watched the world continue. Then I looked at Walter. No. He blinked, not surprised, just sad. You're sure? I'm not coming back, I said. But something else is. He waited. Accountability. Another long silence. I reached into my coat and handed him a folder. Slim, black, no label. Everything they've done. Everything you weren't told. Every line they crossed. He took it with both hands. Heavy even though it weighed nothing. He didn't open it. He knew better than to flip through a ledger of ghosts in public. Press? He asked. Not yet. And the proxy line? Still mine. Quietly. Legally. Irrevocably. Walter nodded again. You built something permanent, Michael. I shook my head. No. I thought I had. But permanence doesn't come from blood, or papers, or even loyalty. He waited for the answer. It comes from presence. From Who Stays When Everything Else Burns. I stood up, buttoned my coat. He looked up at me, hands still on the folder. You could still fix it. Rebuild. I stared down at him. I already rebuilt something, Walter. Me. Then I left. I didn't turn around. Didn't check if he opened the folder. Didn't check if he'd make the calls I knew he would. I didn't need to. The damage was done. And the reckoning had already started. I moved out 3 days later. Lauren wasn't home when I packed. She was in meetings or pretending to be. The house felt like a showroom now. Sterile. Unlived. The walls echoed when I zipped the suitcases closed. The bedroom still smelled like her perfume. Expensive. Cold. Manufactured. I left my ring on the dresser. Didn't leave a note. Didn't send a text. She'd know. By the end of the week, I had closed the joint accounts, canceled my authorizations, changed my number, moved into a quiet condo with bare walls and clean air. I kept no pictures, no tokens, no reminders. Just one thing, the original key to my father's office. Heavy, brass, cut in 1986. Still scratched from the years he carried it on his belt like a badge. I held it once each night, then placed it back in the drawer. I wasn't returning. I just needed to remember. Lauren reached out once. An email. 5 sentences. I know you think I betrayed you. Maybe I did. But this doesn't have to be permanent. Dustin is stepping down. The board is shifting. We can fix this. Please. No apology. Just another offer of shared control, after the kingdom had burned. I didn't reply. She sent one more email a week later. No text this time, no sales pitch, just a single line. I didn't think you'd ever leave. That was her mistake. She thought I was like her, that I needed proximity more than purpose, that I would trade dignity for legacy. She forgot the one truth I never let go of. I was the one who stayed, through illness, through silence, through every moment that demanded a spine no one else in the room could provide. And when staying meant surrendering what I had built, I walked away, because staying is not the same as being silent. She hasn't written again since. I hear Dustin is working at a startup now, something to do with fintech. He's an advisor, whatever that means. He posts articles online about leadership and resilience, quotes my father's values like scripture he never believed in. Let him. I've stopped correcting liars. The truth doesn't need defense. It just needs time. The company survived. Barely. Walter called once, months later, just to say thank you. They restructured, quietly removed Lauren from the board, let Dustin's resignation circulate without fanfare. No press releases, just a fading presence in the margins. They tried to bring me in again. I said no. Again, they couldn't understand. They still thought power was the prize. But power means nothing if you have to beg for respect to hold it. I didn't leave because I lost. I left because I refused to be diminished. Because once a man has been erased, not by enemies, but by the family he thought he built, the only act left is to vanish on his own terms. And that's what I did. I live quiet now. No headlines. No meetings. I drink my coffee alone. Read too much. Think too often, but I sleep. That's something they'll never have again. Peace. Because every time they step into that boardroom, every time they look at that tower, they'll remember whose name isn't written there. Mine. And whose hands built it anyway. Also mine. So now I leave you with this. A question. Was I wrong to walk away from the very thing I once lived for? To abandon the table when they poisoned the wine and called it a toast? To let the structure collapse rather than keep holding it up for people who mistook my patience for weakness? Tell me, if you were the one who stayed, would you have stayed any longer?